let's actually talk about some football because there is a really great game tonight. Like I said earlier, Philadelphia welcoming Minnesota to Lincoln Financial Field for Thursday Night Football. Let's get into it. My gut reaction to this game is the NFL trying to make this a thing? Because no, you don't have deja vu. This is the same way we got started last season, week 2, Thursday Night Football at the Link, Vikings at Eagles. Like, it's the exact same thing. And if I'm a Vikings fan, I'm saying, why are you making us do this again? At least the Vikings last year were coming off the high of a huge win against Green Bay. This year, they're 0-1. They lose a game that they were favored to win. They're probably not feeling so great. And now you got to go play the reigning NFC champs. Like, why do we have to do this week 2 again? Why can't this happen in November? Why is the NFL trying to turn this into some sort of weird rivalry? The Link just has not been kind to the Minnesota Vikings recently. I think I looked this up. 6 of their last 7 games against the Eagles have happened in Philly, and they're 1-3 when they go there. I don't like it. Hopefully they can flip the script. Fortunately for them anyway, there are some factors breaking in the Vikings' way, and that is this is already a very banged up Eagles team. Like, the Eagles, no disrespect to any of their great players, all the all pros, you're all wonderful. But a big part of the Eagles' success last year was that all those guys were on the field. For a team that made it all the way to the Super Bowl, sure, Jalen Hurts missed a couple games. Obviously, again, for the 5th time this episode, everybody deals with injury, but this was a remarkably healthy team last year. Doesn't look like the case heading into week 2. Second-year linebacker Nakobe Dean is already on injured reserve after hurting his foot in the season opener. Now you've got Kenny Gainwell, the undisputed running back 1 for week 1. He's out with a rib injury. Cornerback 2, James Bradbury, who they famously brought back, didn't think they were going to be able to afford him, and here he is. He's out with a concussion. There's another one too. Reed Blankenship, the second-year safety. Everybody, so much good stuff to say about him. Undrafted free agent last year who rose into a starting role. He's out as well. So what's that? 4 starters from the week 1 lineup that aren't going to be available in this game. I'm curious to see how it goes because some of the guys they're going to be asking to step up against the Vikings are not what you would call experienced. Running back, I think, will be fine. Gainwell was the only Eagles running back that carried the ball more than one time against New England. But you do have Boston Scott. You do have DeAndre Swift. You do have Rashad Penny. You got options there. I'm curious to see how the workload is divided because really Swift and Scott barely touched the ball in week 1 and Rashad Penny wasn't even active. So they were really leaning on Kenny Gainwell. So Boston Scott, been in Philly for a long, long time, isn't a guy that carries the ball a lot traditionally, usually averages like 5 or 6 carries a game over the course of his career. So looking at DeAndre Swift, looking at Rashad Penny, I'm curious to see how those guys go. Again, not the biggest problem. For me, the biggest problem, honestly, might be cornerback, where James Bradbury is not available. You do have Darius Slay, but it's looking like the guy that they're going to ask to step in is another second-year player, another undrafted free agent. You know what? I don't want to mispronounce this guy's name, so just bear with me here. Okay. It's Josh Jobe, not Josh Jobe. My apologies, Josh. Josh Jobe, second-year undrafted free agent out of Alabama. Hey, buddy, welcome to the NFL. You want to go help us cover Justin Jefferson? Same thing's happening at the linebacker core, by the way. Honestly, I love stories like this, so just bear with me. Nakobe Dean goes down. The Eagles have Zach Cunningham, who's a longtime veteran in the NFL. But the guy who's likely to start next to Cunningham is a guy by the name of Christian Ellis, who he came in when Dean got hurt in week 1. He actually called the defensive plays, according to defensive coordinator Sean Desai. But what I love about this, undrafted free agent in 2021, signed by Minnesota, bounces around, doesn't have a whole lot of playing time early, gets picked up by Philly where he's appeared in 10 or 11 games. He's never made a start. And now he gets a chance to make his first NFL start on primetime TV against who? The team that originally found him as an undrafted free agent, the Minnesota Vikings. I love stories like that. I can't wait to see if he rises to the occasion. Anyway, back to cornerback. James Bradberry, maybe you've heard of him. Not having him seems like a big deal. Darius Slay and Avonte Maddox are still there. I think that's a huge deal. Those two both picked off Kirk Cousins in this game last year. That's part of why last year's game was such a beatdown. Philly won easily 24-7, and the score honestly didn't reflect how dominant they were. But I am curious about this. If Josh Jobe is really your guy, maybe you use a little bit of Keely Ringo, the rookie out of Georgia. But I'm going to go ahead and assume maybe not quite ready for prime time. But I'm curious about this. I think shadowing a receiver with a cornerback is one of the most overrated storylines in football media. Like, for the amount that we talk about it, my experience leads me to believe it just doesn't happen all that often. Like, yes, in some circumstances it happens, but for the most part, defensive coordinators call their defense. They trust guys to do their job, and the lesser players they give help to rather than reinvent the wheel for one matchup. Having said all of that, I think this is a game where, at least on third downs and in the red zone, you probably tell Darius Slay to go find Justin Jefferson, because the alternative is scary. Remember, it's not just Bradberry that's out. Reed Blankenship is out too. You could be seeing a lot of Sidney Brown, the rookie out of Illinois, at safety. So you could have all kinds of inexperienced players all over the back end of this secondary. And it's Justin Jefferson. He just caught 8 passes for 150 yards a week ago. And I guarantee you he's going to want to avenge a very poor performance in this loss last year. So again, every snap, no, that's silly. But in key situations, in big moments where you think Kirk Cousins is going to be looking his way, I would tell Darius Slay, hey man, go find 18. Now, having said all of that, if you're an Eagles fan, you're probably angry at me because it sounds like I think the Vikings are going to win 50-0. Fortunately for the Birds, the Vikings are dealing with a lot of stuff that plays right into the Eagles' hands. And when I say that, what I really mean is the offensive line. Again, it takes no time at all for what looks like depth or what looks like good health to become terrifying. Starting center Garrett Bradberry has already been announced out with a back injury. Left tackle Christian Darrisaw is limited, questionable, I believe, with an ankle injury. So that's 2 of your 5 on an already... I mean, the Vikings offensive line isn't bad, but we wouldn't call it like one of the very best in the league. And where they are weak is in the middle. Suspect at guard, and now you don't have your starting center. Sounds like a hell of an opportunity for Jalen Carter to announce himself. I mean, he had a wonderful game against New England. Don't get me wrong. He was on our rookies list, but playing at 3:30 as one of 5 games on in the second window is not the same thing as playing in front of America on a Thursday night. I think Jalen Carter, I think Jordan Davis, honestly, whichever of those D linemen Sean Desai wants to throw into the mix to pressure Kirk Cousins in the interior, I say go for it. It should be a very good opportunity for you. I think Kirk Cousins is better than he gets credit for, but I don't think Kirk Cousins is the type of quarterback that's going to easily overcome pressure right up the gut, right in his face. If Jalen Carter's on top of him within a second and a half of getting the ball, it's not going to go well for him. We've seen that before. And on top of that, Kirk Cousins, again, I'm not trying to call the guy a bad athlete, but he's not the quarterback that's going to escape from the pocket and create off schedule and make you pay for break and contain and things like that. No. If you blow up the line, blow up the pocket, get to Kirk Cousins, he's either going to go down or get rid of the ball or do something silly, which is what happened last year when he threw 3 interceptions in this game and the Vikings only scored 7 points. So this is what happens when you play on Thursdays, honestly. Like, the injury reports are long. There are going to be several guys missing from this game. Ultimately, I think even with all of the young guys, maybe I'll be wrong, even with all the young guys missing from the Eagles roster, the Vikings' absences are more impactful. They'll also potentially be without Marcus Davenport, their edge rusher. So even with Danielle Hunter, you go back and watch the Eagles game against New England, their offensive line honestly looked surprisingly mortal. Like, we think so highly of the Eagles' offensive line and they're this impenetrable force. They looked beatable against New England. But the difference is New England has one of the best fronts in football. I don't think the Vikings have that. And without Marcus Davenport, I'm even more confident they don't have that. So I think the Eagles will be able to run the ball a little bit better than they did last week. More importantly, I think Jalen Hurts will be a little cleaner than he was last week, and there should be favorable matchups in the secondary. I do see the Vikings scoring more than the 7 points that they scored last year, because this Eagles defense already didn't look great against New England, and they're very beat up. So hoping for a much more entertaining game, because for all the hype of last year, it was a dud. It was boring. I think, if I remember right, the Bills played that night too against Tennessee, and I had flipped over to that game by halftime because this one was just a laugher. I don't think that's going to be the case tonight, but I do have Philly winning. I'm thinking, I don't know. I'm thinking Philly wins, but probably doesn't cover the 6 or 7 point spread. So give me Philly like 27-23. Yeah, I don't sound confident, but I'm taking Philly.